Joseph Stalin was a complex and contradictory figure, playing various roles such as revolutionary, general, modernizer, and tyrant. Born Joseph Jugashvili on December 6, 1878, in Gori, Georgia, he had a childhood marked by family instability, with his father abandoning the family and his mother trying to provide a better life by sending him to a seminary. Although he initially excelled as a student and choir member, Stalin became disillusioned with religious life and got involved in the revolutionary movement and Marxism. After being expelled from the seminary for his political activities and possession of banned literature, Stalin dedicated himself to revolutionary activism, characterized by extreme and cruel methods. He joined the Bolsheviks under Vladimir Lenin and adopted the name Stalin, meaning man of steel. In 1913, he was exiled to Siberia, where he faced hardships and health problems. Before continuing with the video, remember to leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell to receive notifications of new videos. That way, you won't miss any new content. During this period, he distanced himself from his revolutionary ideals. But in 1917, with the Russian Revolution, he returned to Russia with a renewed purpose. Stalin then gained significant influence within the Central Committee of the Bolsheviks and helped overthrow the provisional government in October 1917. During the subsequent civil war, he stood out for his brutality, using terror to eliminate opponents and consolidate his power. His administration was marked by ruthless methods, including the execution of adversaries and violent repression. In 1922, Stalin was appointed General Secretary of the Soviet Union, a position that granted him considerable power to manipulate government structures and consolidate his position. Lenin's declining health and his rivalry with Trotsky, who had formed an alliance with Lenin, created a power vacuum. Stalin, with his political maneuvering skills and cruelty, managed to maintain his position despite criticism and the break with Lenin. Stalin's trajectory, marked by his rise to power and brutal tactics, had a profound and lasting impact on 20th century history. In 1924, after Lenin's death, Stalin seized the opportunity to consolidate his power. He controlled Lenin's funeral, taking a prominent role as one of the pallbearers and projecting himself as the guardian of Lenin's legacy. At the same time, he manipulated the situation to isolate his rival Trotsky, who was misinformed about the funeral date and missed the event. In the following years, Stalin skillfully aligned his supporters, ousted Trotsky, and eliminated his political opponents, emerging as the supreme leader of the Soviet Union by 1928. With power consolidated, Stalin launched an ambitious industrialization policy to transform the Soviet Union into a modern superpower. In 1931, he declared that the nation was decades behind advanced countries and needed to close this gap quickly. He implemented a series of 5-year plans to accelerate industrialization, but the execution was chaotic. Production targets were often exaggerated and unmet, inflation was uncontrolled, and many factory projects were only partially completed. Despite these problems, industrial production grew significantly, establishing the Soviet Union as a modern industrial nation. To support industrialization, Stalin enforced the collectivization of agriculture, forcing peasants to abandon their private lands and work on collective farms. Those who opposed were severely punished, including beatings, executions, and being sent to gulags, forced labor camps. Resistance was fierce, with many peasants destroying their crops and animals in protest. Stalin's response was brutal, including bombing villages that refused to comply. The lack of incentives and the destruction of crops led to a severe agricultural crisis and a devastating famine, peaking between 1932 and 1933, resulting in the deaths of up to 7 million people and leaving many others permanently disabled. During the famine period in the Soviet Union, the situation became desperate. Parents sold their children for food, and cases of disease and cannibalism were widespread. Those who kept grain reserves were severely punished. Ukraine was particularly affected, with 3.5 million deaths, and the event was called Holodomor, or death by hunger. Stalin exacerbated the crisis by exporting food from Ukraine, and banning migration, forcing inhabitants to survive in extreme conditions and often resorting to cannibalism. For Stalin, controlling the countryside was a priority to feed industrial workers, even if it meant the death of millions of peasants. In the 1930s, Stalin's paranoia grew, leading him to constantly seek out traitors and conspiracies to secure his power. He used the assassination of politician Sergei Kirov as a pretext to attack his opponents, resulting in a series of public trials between 1936 and 1938. The accused, many of whom were former Bolsheviks, were tortured and executed based on fabricated evidence. Stalin replaced these veterans with young, loyal, and manipulable politicians. The purges extended to the military and society at large, with over 35,000 officers executed and the Navy losing all its admirals. The secret police, under the command of Nikolai Yezhov, imposed quotas for arrests and executions, leading to the period known as the Great Terror between 1937 and 1938, when about 1.6 million people were imprisoned and 700,000 executed. Stalin's paranoia created an atmosphere of fear and distrust, hindering innovation and economic growth, especially in the military sector, which suffered from a lack of experienced commanders. With the onset of World War II, Stalin signed the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact with Hitler, allowing him to invade and take parts of Eastern Europe. These territories quickly suffered the same oppression as the Soviet Union. A notorious example was the Katyn massacre in 1940, where nearly 22,000 Polish prisoners were executed to prevent ideological opposition. In 1940, a Soviet agent located and assassinated Leon Trotsky with an ice pick in Mexico City, eliminating a long-standing rival of Stalin. However, on June 22, 1941, Stalin faced a monumental challenge when Hitler broke the Non-Aggression Pact and launched a surprise invasion of the Soviet Union. The Soviet army, weakened and disorganized due to Stalin's political purges, suffered devastating losses. Stalin went into shock and, just a week after the invasion began, disappeared from government, retreating to his home in Moscow. A group of terrified officials was forced to approach him to convince him to resume leadership of the war effort. Stalin, now in command, applied his brutal and ruthless tactics. He demanded that every inch of territory be held at all costs and ordered the execution of any soldier who surrendered, resulting in the unnecessary loss of thousands of lives. Those deemed cowardly or spreading fear were sent to penal battalions, used as cannon fodder in battles to deplete enemy ammunition. Additionally, Stalin made it illegal to be captured, severely punishing the families of prisoners and deserters by removing pensions and imprisoning them. Terror and severe discipline marked the Soviet war effort. In just 4 months, over 10,000 army members were executed by their own superiors, often in front of their comrades, to ensure obedience and fear. However, the tide of the war began to change due to a combination of Soviet heroism, Russia's heavy industrial capacity, and support from Western allies. By 1944, the Soviets started pushing the Germans out of the Soviet Union and managed to capture Berlin, marking a significant turning point in the war. Although Stalin achieved absolute power, he struggled with his personal image. Standing only 1.62 meters tall, he wore thick-soled shoes to appear taller and took measures to hide the smallpox scars on his face, employing makeup artists and retouching photographs. The discrepancy between his real appearance and the heroic figure portrayed by Soviet propaganda shocked those who knew him. In his final years, Stalin became paranoid and isolated, trusting no one. During the Great Terror, he had imprisoned and killed some of his own family members, and his son Yakov was captured and killed during World War II. Stalin married Nadezhda Alliluyeva in 1919, but their relationship was marked by infidelities and ended with Nadezhda's suicide in 1932. His children faced significant challenges. Vasily, an arrogant and irresponsible young man, became a general in the war, but his irresponsibility led to the death of an officer and issues with alcoholism and chronic diseases. After Stalin's death, Vasily was imprisoned and died in exile at 40. Svetlana, despite receiving more attention, frequently fought with her father over her relationships, and their relationship deteriorated. After Stalin's death, Svetlana defected to the United States. In his later years, Stalin suffered serious serious health problems due to smoking, drinking, and overwork. On March 1, 1953, he suffered a debilitating stroke at his home in Moscow. His guards, fearing to disturb him, delayed entering his room, and the prolonged hesitation delayed medical attention. By the time a doctor was finally called, it was too late. Stalin had suffered a cerebral hemorrhage and died on March 5, 1953, at the age of 74. Stalin is remembered as one of the most notorious leaders in history. Although he transformed the Soviet Union into a modern superpower and led the country during World War II, his rule was marked by immense human cost. Between 1930 and 1952, over 26 million people were killed, imprisoned, or exiled, and at least 60 million were subjected to repression. Soviet propaganda, however, portrayed Stalin as a hero and a paternal figure, with many expressing genuine mourning for his death. Stalin's legacy, though oppressive and brutal, had a lasting impact, shaping the world with a legacy of fear and injustice. His name remains a dark reminder of absolute power in its cruelest forms. But in today's video, we only offer a summary of Stalin's life and actions. If you're interested, we can prepare a more detailed video that thoroughly explores Stalin's entire trajectory, from his rise to power to the most significant events of his rule. We'll cover his policies, controversial decisions, impact on the Soviet Union and the world, and the complex relationship with his family and associates. If you have any interest, let us know so we can provide a more comprehensive and enriching content on this historical leader and his consequences for global history. If you enjoyed the story and want to support the channel, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. You can also become a member to further encourage the content. See you next time.